Welcome to the radio program, The Uncreated Light Blog. I'm your host, Drake Shelton, on this July 19th, 2013. This broadcast is for the spiritual and temporal benefit of my people, the atheist-driven and socially suicidal minority, Caucasian peoples, primarily the peoples of the Southland of America, but also of the world, the white race, known in biblical chronology as the line of Japheth. This broadcast is intended to call my peoples back to their covenant obligations in the solemn league and covenant, pursuant to the royal prerogative of Yeshua HaMashiach, who, having resurrected from the dead, ascended far above all rule, authority, power, and dominion, for he must reign until he has put all his enemies under his feet, for he is the ruler of the kings of the earth. In doing so, this broadcast will expose the unforgivable treason committed against Yeshua's royal prerogative by the so-called Enlightenment and its offspring, dispensationalism, Arminianism, liberty of conscience, materialism, Darwinism, and their social applications, pluralism, integration, miscegenation, and the communist idea of rights developed out of abolition philosophy in the mid to late 19th century. I'm supposed to be having Eric Phelps on with me today. I'm waiting. There he is, right there.
Hey, here I am, Drake. Sorry I'm late.
Hey, Eric, you with me? All right, very.
Yeah, I'm with you now. Yeah.
I'm glad you made it. I was listening to your program right when you were ending right there, and I was hoping you were going to get in pretty clean, and you did. So I'm grateful you're here with me.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you too, Drake.
I follow a number of guys that are part of a kind of a white nationalist movement in the South, and constantly on my Facebook page, I'm seeing stuff about Jews. Just everything is about Jews. That's the big problem, they think. And have you ever heard of this guy, Brother Nathaniel?
Oh yeah,
you've heard of him.
Orthodox.
Yeah,
oh,
yeah, the Russian Orthodox.
I'm totally convinced, brother, that he's a Jesuit co-adjutor, completely.
Why do you think that? Is there
the Jesuits have penetrated the Orthodox Church completely.
Oh,
In fact, their patriarch was Jesuit trained.
Okay. Oh, Ware, right? Timothy Ware? Is he Russian? He's not the Russian. He's part of the Greek, right?
I think it was Krill. I think his name was Krill. I have it in my notes here.
Krill?
But
okay.
This patriarch was trained by Jesuits. So, and I have a book here on the Jesuits. They learned the old Eastern Rite, so they can penetrate the Orthodox Church. And today, the Orthodox Church, the only difference between the Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church is between Tweedledee and Tweedledum.
Yeah.
It's terrible, oppressing the people. I have a lady friend who was a missionary there, and she told me the Orthodox Church in Romania told the people that they would have to give their entire wages for the year to get him to do some prayers or whatever it was.
Oh, wow.
Unbelievable. Yeah, and I have a missionary friend there, Pete Heisey. He's to Romania. He told me that the leading Orthodox priest in the town there where he's at, he's the head of the occult. And he puts spells on people, and they pay, the people go to the Orthodox priest to put spells on other people. So it's unbelievable. Yeah, incredible.
I want my listeners, I want to give you a context of this guy, Brother Nathaniel. I got a clip here from one of his videos, and this is going to be foundational to the conversation that Eric and I are about to have. This is a YouTube. He has a very popular YouTube clip. I see this smothered all over my Facebook all the time, and I've had pretty heated conversations with some friends of mine on Facebook about this guy. So I just want you to listen to a video here that he has put out on Facebook just a few weeks ago. Here it goes.
Europe is the church, and the church is Europe, wrote Hilaire Belloc, the 20th century English historian. But with the dismantling of the church accomplished by the regicides of Charles I, Louis XVI, and Tsar Nicholas II, church and state no longer act as a foil against the intrigues of international Jewry. Today, Europe, once known and experienced as Christendom, wherein Jews were considered enemies of the gospel, is a secular wasteland. It's ruled instead by the synagogue, with Jews at the highest levels of economic, political, and cultural influence.
Okay, so that's the substance of it. Okay, he's wanting everybody to believe that the downfall of the monarchical powers in Europe is behind, and the people behind that are the Jews. And the Protestant, what you get when you start talking to these people, you start digging into their thought process, is that behind the rise of the Jews is the Protestant Reformation.
Yeah.
The Protestant Reformation is what is the platform upon which the Jews have risen to power in the West. They killed off, and supposedly the communist regimes that rise up in France and other areas in Russia. Somehow that's connected to the Protestant Reformation. How they pull that piece of gymnastics off is beyond me. But it's all this, the communist movements and the revolutions, the American Revolution, it's all connected. It's a Jewish conspiracy for Jews to gain power. Okay, that's what this is about. Okay, that's what these guys think. All right, so we just need to start at the beginning of European history. Eric, can you tell us who were the first international bankers in Europe? Can we talk about this?
Yes, we did. The first international bankers in Europe were the Knights Templars.
Are they Jews?
They ran everything.
Were those Jews?
They're white Gentiles, Frenchmen particularly. Yep. Well, you have the suppression of the Templars in 1312 by the Pope Clement V, and encouraged by Philip the Fair, who was the King of France, and that's why they burned Jacques de Molay at the stake, because he was the head of the Templars. So the Templars were absolutely white Gentiles running the banking of Europe, and not only Europe, because you see the Templars were having a trade around the world. They were the big shippers. So, no, they were the first, but there were some Jews that were also bankers at the time, but they were subordinate to the Templars, and they were called the Fuggers. The Fuggers, and you can read about them in Ridfat's Universal History.
Okay.
So the Jesuits have done the same thing, because remember, the Jesuits are the new Knights Templars, so they have then sought to use certain Jews as front men to make it look like the Jews run everything, when the fact of the matter is the 10 Roman families are the giga-trillionaires, the big bankers. In fact, the head of the European bank there in Europe, his name was Draghi. He's an Italian Knight of Malta, but nobody talks about him.
Yeah. And folks listening, Eric has made a series of videos. I think one guy put it together in one video. It's called The Jesuit Banking System on YouTube. It's very good. I listened to the whole thing a couple times through. I'd like to document all that and just put it on one page on my website just to show everyone that the heads of the big banking cartels, not only in our country, the Bank of America and all the big banking organizations here in America, not only here but also with the European Union, are white men that are associated or connected somehow with the Knights of Malta or some other Masonic organization. And that brings us to another issue with the Templars. It is something these men here in America, these white men who think the Jews are behind everything and the Jews are controlling everything, they correctly see some problems with the Zionist obsession with the United States military, some forms of dispensational Baptist theology, and we are led to believe that Jews are the only ones that are concerned about Zionism, but that's not true. As you pointed out in your work, Eric, the Templars and their Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem is really the kind of the golden age of Zionism.
Of course, yeah. Because remember, the Templars, the Knights Templars, and the Equestrians were there too. And that's pretty well shown in the book Kingdom, or in the movies Kingdom of Heaven, that two-part set. But the Knights Templars were busy running the kingdom, the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem, as a sort of universal world headquarters for themselves. And when I believe the Lord used the Muslims to end that, because he raised up the Mamluks out of Egypt to drive out the Knights Templars in 1291. So that's the formal end of the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem. And they were driven to Rhodes. They were driven to surrounding islands, and then ultimately it went to Malta. Hold just a second.
Okay.
I don't lose the phone here. Hold it. What happened was the Mamluks drove them out. So then the Knights Templars ultimately went and became the Scottish Knights Templars, and then that's where you have Scottish Rite Freemasonry revived by the Jesuits. But the Jesuits then would use Napoleon to punish the Mamluks in the Battle of Egypt there in Cairo, and he would kill the entire Mamluk bodyguard of the Sultan as vengeance for what the Mamluks did when they drove out the Templars in 1291.
Huh.
That's the only way we can understand. That's the only way we can understand Napoleon's invasion of Egypt. Otherwise, it makes complete and total no sense at all.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like I've got another caller here. I'm going to see if they have a question. Hold on one second here.
Sure.
Hello, caller. Who's this?
Jason from Texas. I'm just listening.
Oh, you're just listening. Okay. Did you have a question for Eric or for myself? Or?
Not yet. You come back to me.
Okay, I'll just beat you and get back to you later. Okay. All right. Sorry about that, Eric. I saw another caller there. I thought he might have a question. All right. So here's another issue, and I hear them talking about this stuff pretty frequently. The Alumbrados. I'm probably not pronouncing that properly. Who are these guys, the Alumbrados?
The Alumbrados were a Spanish secret society at the time of Ignatius Loyola. And Loyola was a member of it, because remember, Loyola was also, and this is hard to find, but my former pastor found it for me, Loyola was a Spanish Templar.
Okay.
And so he was a Spanish Templar, he was an Alumbrados, which is small to me, the enlightened ones, the Illuminati, as the Jesuits would later found that in 1776.
Right.
And so he would begin to build this super secret society, which he first named the Knights of the Virgin Mary, and then he later changes to the Society of Jesus, as a new Knights Templar for the twofold purpose of taking Jerusalem from the Saracens and for destroying the Reformation in Europe and restoring the Pope's temporal power, or his political rule of all governments over the world. That was the purpose and is the purpose of the Jesuits.
Yeah. And I remember when I was a Presbyterian seminary student, Wiley's History of Protestantism was a standard issue. And in that work, he talks about how their agenda is to get all of the gold and the silver of Christendom. He makes that very clear.
Very clear. And that's, for your listeners, it's volume 2, book 15. It's about 50 pages. And I copied every one of those pages, and I put them in at the end of my Vatican investment CDs. I've got them all there. Well, good. You mean to tell me they actually issued that book to you for students in seminary?
Well, I mean, it was kind of standard reading among the Presbyterian ministers, and they kind of one of the ministers that went to our church at that time, he had there was a split somewhere in Greenville, and there his kind of like half of his congregation came to worship with us at the time, and he was giving us books from his library, and he wanted us to have he wanted to make sure we had Wiley's huge volumes on the history of Protestantism.
God bless him. God bless him. That's where I learned the greatness of Knox.
Yeah.
That's just when he refused to give the communion to the infidels there, to the levelers, to the and it's just a wonderful work. Anyway, I don't want to get sidetracked.
That's okay. That's okay. And here comes another one of these. I don't know what we should call these guys. These guys who, I mean, they're kind of going along the Nazi fascist line.
Yes. Hey, let me interrupt you. Let me interrupt you for 1 second, Drake.
All right.
On this, this guy quoted Hilary Belloc. Okay. Hilary Belloc was a fanatical Roman Catholic disinformation historian.
Okay.
And I've read several of his works, and it's a terrible twist of history, and that was his purpose, to rewrite history and to twist it. So he's a notorious liar. So to quote Hilary Belloc on anything of substance, you're going down the wrong road, and you can disprove most of what he says.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe we should call these guys disinformation agents or Jesuit coadjutors.
Absolutely.
They love to say that Ignatius Loyola was a Jew.
Yeah.
They're upset. Like some of the more honest ones. And I listened to your debate that you had with that gentleman. What was his name now? A couple of years ago, was it? On whether the Jews are the Jesuits.
Michael Collins Piper.
Yeah, Michael Collins Piper. Thank you. Yeah, and I remember listening to that. And some of these guys are not as obstinately, stubborn like he was. They'll actually look at the history of this, and they'll admit the Jesuits are huge players in the New World Order. And so, in order to make it fit their theory, they have to make Ignatius Loyola a Jew.
Sure.
Every standard work that I've read on this man, on biography that I've read, says that he was a Spanish man. He was from a Basque noble family. He was not a Jew, and he actually stated in one of his works he wished he was a Jew. What do you know of any sources that claim that Ignatius Loyola was a Jew, or at least an ethnic Jew?
No, not one. And I'll tell you that this is another lie of the Jesuits, because you see, once people start to catch on that the Jesuits are ruling everything, then the only military response to that is that they can't disprove it.
Yeah.
There is military response to say, well, he's a Jew, and the Jews run the Jesuits, and therefore I told you the Jews run everything. But they will do this in the face of the facts that Loyola was number one, a Spanish nobleman of the House of Loyola. Yeah. He was a military warrior. He was a Spanish Templar. He was of noble blood, and he hated the Jews, according to Boyd Barrett. And Boyd Barrett was a Jesuit for many years. He left the order. He came to know the Lord. He was never saved. But he wrote a book, 2 books. One of them is called The Jesuit Enigma. Okay. And another book he wrote is called Rome Stoops to Conquer.
Okay.
In those books, it tells you that Loyola never said any good thing or anything of such of the sort about Jews.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And Francis Xavier says in Rome Stoops to Conquer, he said, give me a place where there are no Muslims or Jews. Yeah. And Francis Xavier was Loyola's right-hand man who went into, India.
Oh, here in my hometown of Louisville, we have quite a Jesuit hive here. We have Bellarmine University, and then we also have the most well-known high school here is Xavier High School, and it is a hive of Jesuits. Yes. Oh, yes. And folks, I just want you to know that kind of attitude towards the Jews is traditional and heretic in Roman Catholic theology. Okay, I just want to give you 2 classic quotes from major early church Roman Catholic theologians. This is coming from Justin Martyr in his Dialogue with Trypho, chapter 16, quotation. For the circumcision according to the flesh, which is from Abraham, was given for a sign that you may be separated from other nations. And he's talking to Jews, by the way. And from us, and that you alone may suffer that which you now justly suffer, that your land may be desolate, and your cities burned with fire, and that strangers may eat your fruit in your presence, and not one of you may go up to Jerusalem. For you are not recognized among the rest of men by any other mark than your fleshly circumcision. For none of you, I suppose, will venture to say that God neither did nor does foresee the events which are future, nor foreordained his deserts for each one. Accordingly, these things have happened to you in fairness and justice, for you have slain the just one and his prophets before him. Now, here is the most popular Roman Catholic theologian that was used during the Nazi regimes in Germany. His name is John Chrysostom. He was a notorious anti-Semite. This man was unbelievable. He wrote numerous works against the Jews. His most famous works, most quoted by the Nazis, was his 8 homilies against the Jews. Okay, and you can read the Nazi use of this work in Walter LaCour's book, The Changing Face of Anti-Semitism. And this is just one quote from Chrysostom's homilies. Quote, "For they brought the books of Moses and the prophets along with them into the synagogue, not to honor them, but to outrage them with dishonor. When they say that Moses and the prophets knew not Christ and said nothing about his coming, what greater outrage could they do to those holy men than to accuse them of failing to recognize their master, than to say that those saintly prophets are partners of their impiety? And so it is that we must hate both them and their synagogue all the more because of their offensive treatment of those holy men." Okay? The seething hatred that Chrysostom has for the Jews, it's all over his writings. It's all over. Now, this brings us to another very important issue. What about Luther? What about Luther and his book, The Jews and Their Lies? I think you've written some on that issue, have you not, Eric?
Yes, I have. Well, number one, I came out in my book and said plainly that Luther never wrote on the Jews and their lies.
No.
That was released 3 years after his death. So he never wrote the thing. Supposedly it was in 1543, but it was after that. It was after Luther died, because Luther never said such a thing, and I'll tell you why. You go to his commentary on Romans, and he never writes anything like that.
Yeah.
In fact, I have Lincoln's work where he quotes Luther in saying that obviously Israel will be restored, and Lord haste the day. I have it in my PowerPoint.
Yeah.
So Luther never wrote on the Jews and their lies for 2 reasons. Number one, the theology in On the Jews and Their Lies, because On the Jews and Their Lies teaches work salvation. Luther hated work salvation. He came to know the Lord for Romans 1:17, the just shall live by faith, as you know. He hated anybody that said in any kind of work salvation, and that's what you see all through in the Jews and Their Lies.
Yep.
The second reason why you can reject it as a work of Luther is the whole language of On the Jews and Their Lies. Luther didn't have that style.
Oh, okay.
It was not his Lutheran style. So those are the 2 reasons why. Someday I'll write something up and publish on it, but those are the 2 primary reasons. And then in Jews and Their Lies, he's quoting from the Latin Psalms, what is it, Ne Timere, something like that. It's the Latin Psalm, the Misery. Luther doesn't quote from that. He's quoting from the Puritan Bible, or he'll quote from the Hebrew, but he's not going to quote any Latin, Jerome's Latin Vulgate, you know. Yeah. So all these things have the despicable flavor of the Jesuits, and they're masters at having books written by them and attributed to other people. Counterfeits. Mein Kampf is another one. Hoover's the Great Deceit's another one. I mean, what is it? ISIS Unveiled and The Secret Doctrine by Blavatsky. That's another couple of manuscripts written by Jesuits. They're the masters of counterfeiting, writing books and attributed to their co-Jews.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have a possible name that you think may have done it? A certain individual? Just maybe a guess, maybe best guess of who you think did it?
Well, I don't know, because, see, at the time, the Jesuits were just getting started. They were founded in 1534. They brought into the papacy in 1540. Luther dies, in 1546, I believe. They say he wrote it in 1543. One of the first things they attack is Luther. It wouldn't surprise me if Xavier, Salmeron, or one of those guys wrote it themselves. Maybe Borgia.
Yeah. Well, this leads to another issue, and this is from the Catholic Gazette. It was written in 1936. This is kind of the holy grail of our Jesuit coadjutors here. They point to this as the definitive proof that the Jews were behind the Protestant Reformation. They quote this document. They think that they've gotten a hold of this document here that was supposedly being distributed among Jews. let me give you just the preface to this little article in the Catholic Gazette. It says that there has been and still is a Jewish problem no one can deny. Since the rejection of Israel 1900 years ago, the Jews have scattered in every direction. And in spite of difficulties and even persecution, they have established themselves as a power in nearly every nation of Europe. Jacobs, in his Jewish contributions to civilization, glories in the fact that without detriment to their own racial unity and international character, the Jews have been able to spread their doctrines and increase their political, social, and economic influence among the nations. In view of this Jewish problem, which affects the Catholic Church in a special way, we publish the following amazing extracts from a number of speeches recently made under the auspices of a Jewish society in Paris. The name of our informant must remain concealed. He is personally known. He is personally known to us by reason of his peculiar relations with the Jews at the present time. We have agreed not to disclose his identity nor to give any further details of the Paris meeting beyond the following extracts, yada yada. And it goes down here. Let me give you the section which touches on the Protestant Reformation. Quotation. Okay, so here's the speech. He's quoting, the Catholic Gazette is now quoting from this speech by this Jew. Okay? Quotation. Martin Luther yielded to the influence of his Jewish friends, and again by Jewish authority and with Jewish finance, his plot against the Catholic Church met with success. Thanks to our propaganda, to our theories of liberalism, and to our misrepresentations of freedom, the minds of many among the Gentiles were ready to welcome the Reformation. They separated from the Church to fall into our snare, and thus the Catholic Church has been very sensibly weakened, and her authority over the kings and Gentiles has been reduced almost to naught. This is rich right here. We are grateful to Protestants for their loyalty to our wishes. Although most of them are, in the sincerity of their faith, unaware of their loyalty to us, we are grateful to them for the wonderful help they are giving us in our fight against the strongholds of Christian civilization and in our preparations for the advent of our supremacy over the whole world and over the kingdoms of the Gentiles. Okay, so it just goes on with this propaganda. It doesn't actually tell us who these friends were of Martin Luther that influenced him. I don't know of it. Do you know who they could possibly be talking about?
I've never come across of any influential Jew in any historical writing on Luther.
Neither have I.
None. So therefore, the question is, who financed Luther?
Yeah.
Because he had it. Well, we know it was Frederick the Elector.
Yeah.
Frederick the Elector paid him helped him, kept him fed and clothed when he was Knight George at Wartburg Castle for 10 months, putting the Bible into German. There were no Jews involved in that.
Yeah.
So all this is 1936 when you read this. This is the Jesuits in Europe seeking to unite Protestants and Catholics together against the Jews. That's what they want.
Yeah, that's right, exactly right. And folks, I just want you to know. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
They come up with this bogus Jewish author that's saying these things. They do the same thing with that one other guy with Friedman.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to attribute all these terrible things to the Jews, and they're using one of their court Jews to write it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Without any historical documentation.
Yeah. And for our listeners, I want you to know this is exactly what we are faced with right now. And the Jesuits have done this, like in the last couple centuries, in the beginning part of the 1800s, the 19th century. And Eric has done a great job of documenting this in his work, Vatican Assassins. You have the revitalization of the Jesuit order in 1814. Right after this, you have these two real big meetings that happen. You have what's called the Council of Vienna, the Treaty of Verona, and then there's this other thing called this Cherry Council in Italy. And overseeing all of this is this Roman. He was a representative of the Holy Roman Empire. His name was Prince von Metternich. He was over this huge agenda in Europe and even over here in the United States because one of his good buddies was Charles Sumner. Charles Sumner,
right.
That wicked, filthy Yankee abolitionist over here who was going to be responsible for the revitalization of monarchical powers in our land.
That's right.
That's right. I have documented. I wrote a book on this on my blog. It's for free. I put it on my blog. It's called The End of the Antebellum South. I've spent about 1,500 hours putting this book together. I did this all last year. Eric's book was the inspiration for me to write this book on the Antebellum South, and I connect.
By the way, brother, just let me add this before I forget.
Yeah.
I discovered this connection between Metternich and Scumner, which I call Charles Scumner, in the library, F&M library in Lancaster, back in the Marshall College Library, in the basement of the books that were in, they're locked up and they're not allowed to be checked out.
Yeah.
You can.
Yeah.
They're part of their exhibit, and it was a 3-volume set on Metternich. So I thought, well, Lord, I wonder what this is here. I got one of the volumes down, and just in the providence of God, it turned me right there where Metternich was meeting with Charles Sumner, an American senator right there. And I said, this is the connection of the radical Red Republicans to the Congress of Vienna.
That's right.
Wow.
That's right.
So
it's also
right
in his letters.
Oh, okay.
The letters of Charles Sumner, he talks about it. I've got it quoted and linked on my blog. It's on Google Books. So okay, this is the first attempt that we have here. At least one of the. I mean, obviously the Jesuits tried to regain the Holy Roman Empire with the 30 Years' War. They failed. You have the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648, and this huge explosion of culture and progress over in Europe because of the Protestant Reformation, its influence into society.
By the way, for your listeners too, Drake, before I forget this, remember, any modern history class that you take in any university, they will always tell you the beginning of the modern era is 1648 with the Peace of Westphalia. Always.
That's right. Yep. Yeah, and I mean, look at the big players that come out right after this. I mean, Voltaire. I mean, my beloved Queen Bess, Queen Elizabeth. She has a golden age of her own in England with all the, but with 1648 that's the real kicker all over Europe, and so we have that. They completely fail. And then, they fail with their attempts to regain powers in England with the fall of that filthy Duke of York, James II, and when William and Mary take over. And then in the 1800s, they try it again with Metternich. It's blocked here in America with the Monroe Doctrine, and then. In the 1900s, they try it again. Folks, when Hitler called his little regime over there the Third Reich, he was telling you that he was trying to continue something. You can go on Wikipedia and read this. The Third Reich was a revitalization of the Holy Roman Empire. This is not a conspiracy theory, folks. This is standard history. All right, so what?
And furthermore, Drake, remember when his invasion of Russia? What does he call it? Operation Barbarossa.
Oh, okay.
Who's Barbarossa? He's the German crusader of the Third Crusade.
Oh, wow. Yeah, absolutely. That's huge. Huge. Yeah. So what we are here involved with now here in the 20th century. I want you to know this, listener, and I know I probably got some of you Jesuit coadjutors, and I don't want to be too derogatory with you because you're my brother. Some of you guys are in the Sons of Confederate Veterans. Some of you guys support the Confederacy. You're white men from the South. You're my brethren. I love you. Okay, you're being deceived. You're being drawn away from what you need into this deceit. You're going to be used as cannon fodder by the Jesuit order to do their bidding here in our country. And you turn away from these deceits. They are trying. We have this huge crisis. The Jesuits have made way now for the last century or more for the white nations, the white European nations of the Protestant Reformation to be completely surrounded, completely invaded with all these different foreigners coming over here with all their religions and all of their cultures and stuff.
Yep.
And we are sitting here, we are in panic mode. And we have been brought to this place where we have to do something. we can't just sit here and do something. And the Jesuits are taking full advantage of this. And what they're going to do is they're using this they're using this to unite the Protestant white men and the Catholic white men together. And
That's
they
right.
are using it to revitalize the Holy Roman Empire.
That's right. That's right. Well, look at what they called it. They called it the Department of Homeland Security.
Yeah.
Whenever you have anything talking about a homeland, it's either Nazi or communist, and the Jesuits run both Nazism and communism.
Yeah.
So that's going to be our Holy Office of the Inquisition, the Department of what I call Homeland Security. Yeah. They're going to absorb all the intelligence communities. I know that they're going to absorb the FBI one of these days. And so it's going to be the Pope's Super Gestapo here in North America, composed of Protestants and Catholics, as was the SS, but the primary leaders will be Roman Catholics, as it was the SS.
Yeah, and later on in this little propaganda piece with this Catholic Gazette in 1936, it talks about how that we are, and by we I'm talking about as if I'm the author of that work, that Jewish work. He says we are the masters of class warfare, and that was the kicker for me. As soon as I read that, I was like, that is a Jesuit writing this right here.
Yeah. Well, you know what that sounds like? It sounds like the protocols.
Yeah, protocols.
That's exactly what the protocols say. Yeah. And as I said before in my book and talked with you about, the Jesuits wrote the protocols, and it is documented by ex-Roman Catholic priest who became a missionary, a preacher to the Catholic people in New York City. His name was Leo Lehman. Leo Lehman wrote this tremendous work, Behind the Dictators, and in that he said the Jesuits wrote the protocols, and he proves it.
Yeah. And folks, I just want to, because as Eric does, he devotes his episodes and his broadcasts to white men, and I do the same thing. And I primarily devote it to my beloved Southern white men, and especially to those men who are the original stock of this land. My ancestors came here 400 years ago. We were part of the original Jamestown colony. We were running for our lives from Charles I over there in England when he was persecuting Protestants. He was continuing the policies of his father, James I, with his Black Acts. But he was persecuting Protestants. He came over here. We came over here. And my fifth great-grandfather fought with George Washington, the Revolutionary War. He then fought with the Battle of Kings Hill. And my third great-grandfather fought through the Confederacy. And I am a part of the original stock of this land here with the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. And I will be damned before I let, and I want you to, I know you feel the same way I do, brother. I know I've seen it in your eyes when we are at our meetings. We are going to be damned before we let this happen to our country. We are not going to relieve our religion, and we're not going to give over the inheritance of our fathers to all these foreigners with their gods and their religions. No, we're not doing that. But we also don't want to get into what the Jesuits want. The Jesuits want this hateful, bloodthirsty mentality so that we'll fall in line with their bloodthirsty fascist regime that they're bringing up here. We don't want that. We want to stay away from that.
That's right. And the other thing we got to be concerned about is we can't be driven into hating the black man.
Yeah, absolutely.
What we have to do is we have to hate the separation of the race in certain areas where we have our own white nation, the blacks have their own black nation. And those that want to race mix, they can continue to stay here. But we have to racially separate unto nationhood, which is a biblical maxim.
Yeah, I agree.
Anybody that calls for racial separation today, they want to immediately tag, he's a racist, he hates black people, and the blacks don't want to racially separate. They're racist, they hate white people, and the vast majority that you hear, like Shabiz of the New Black Panthers or Farrakhan, well, of course they hate black people because they're working for the Pope to incite a black-on-white race war. That's what they want.
And I tell you, Eric, just this last week, I had a friend of mine from California. She's a Latino girl. We went to college together. And last year we were talking, and I told her, I was just looking at my blog. On June 7th was my first entry on my blog. This is when I first started to lose. I've lost about 75% of my readers over this issue. And I've started putting on my blog that there's going to be a race war here. I listened to your series, I listened to your works that you did, and I did my own research, and I wrote a number of things on this, and I became completely convinced that you're right about this. And 2 days ago, my friend from California calls me up. I haven't heard from her for a long time. She calls me up and she goes, Drake, this race war has started. She lives in Los Angeles. They had a huge riots over there in the last few days. And she's like,
after the Zimmerman decision, yeah.
She's like, I thought you were crazy. I thought you were racist and stuff, but you're right. This stuff is happening. I'm like, I know.
Right.
And
I talked to a black man. I talked to a big black guy yesterday at Lancaster Bible College. I decided to go over there. It's my old where I graduated. And I wanted to go to the library where they moved the library, and they built a new building. Well, I went in there and I thought, I got to see this library because that's the place of real wealth, And as I was sitting there, that's where all the nuggets of gold are. And I found what I wanted to read, but in the providence of God, there was a big black guy that came over and wanted to talk to me out of the blue. So I said, okay. So we sat and talked for a while, and I told him all this. I said, I teach in the Jesuit order. I said, they're fomenting a race war, and they want to have the majority savage blacks, which I consider 75 to 80% of the black community to be majority savage blacks. And 20 to 25% are the civil minority blacks, and many of them believe the Bible. He said, you're right. He said, I'm having a problem myself in the inner city here in Lancaster. I said, well, just know this. The Jesuits are using their agents in the black community to foment a race war in every major city in this country. And when it starts to break forth, millions of white people are going to die within the first 20, 30 days, and then the Department of Homeland Security will come out to the rescue and enslave everybody.
Yep. Yeah, I remember telling this to a man last year as a black gentleman, and he was not a Bible believer, and it was pretty tall. It was pretty awful. I thought I was going to have to run for my life here. I told him these things that I believe, and he got really mad because I think he figured that I was telling the truth, but he just didn't want to have to face the reality of it. But
that's the problem. Excuse me. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say
that's the problem in dealing with many blacks. Blacks, they want to go to fists right away. They want to fight right away. Well, if that's what you want to do, we can do that too. But see, that's never how you talk something through to a logical conclusion. And so because they're easily excitable to violence, it's very difficult to reach them with these facts because they've been brainwashed to hate all white people.
That's right.
And are not thankful for the conveniences they have in North America because of white men and their inventions and Jews that aided us in our inventions that we didn't persecute. More blacks are waking up to this. I have two strong black supporters who are in their communities advocating against the new Black Panthers, against the Nation of Islam, and are calling for racial separation and the nationhood for their own black nation. So I believe this is starting to move even among the blacks now.
Yeah, and I want to just a short. I don't want to go into my book on this, but I want you to know, if you're a listener and you're a black man, I have went to great pains to document for you with numerous primary sources and some secondary sources that the colony of Virginia, where my ancestors came from, which was it was like the headquarters of the South, we did everything that we possibly could to stop that damn slave trade from coming to our land.
That's right.
Everything we possibly could. King George shoved that thing right down our throats here. And and Thomas Jefferson in our original Constitution says he did it to start a race war here.
Original Declaration. That's right.
That's right. Well, it's also in the original Constitution as well. Go ahead.
Sure. I know it's in the Declaration because I have it in Blake's History of Slavery and the Slave Trade. For any of you listening that want to get the real history of the slavery and the slave trade, W.O. Blake is the classic. History of Slavery and the Slave Trade. And it has Jefferson's whole work right in there. He says, they put this execrable slave trade upon us that the king has refused our colonial legislators to forbid, and then he's exciting the blacks against the white population for our destruction. Exactly the same policy of today. That's right.
That's right. And I've documented as well on my response. I did a lengthy response to two university professors. I think it's in Idaho. Now it was a few months ago, and they're in Idaho, and they point out they ask these two Southern gentlemen that wrote a defense of the South why all the slave rebellions happened here in the early colonies. If we were so good to the blacks, why is it that they rebelled? I have documented for you the Jesuits were behind this. We had one group of them came over here from the Congo where they used to be a reduction over there in Africa. And they were Jesuit trained to do this. And then you have Nat Turner. He was accompanied by 2 French Jacobins to do what he did. And he even says in his own writings that his master was good to him, but he had been taught this liberation theology crap. And we're going to talk about that here in a moment. We're going to talk about where liberation theology came from. He had been taught this stuff, and he was incited to these riots by these French Jacobin gentlemen who remained unnamed. I haven't found a name for them yet, but they talk about it in his book, in his own work.
But for the listeners' benefit, remember the French Jacobins were totally run by the Jesuits.
That's right.
One of the foremost Jacobins was Abbe Sieyès, and he was on the directory. Abbe Sieyès later goes on to be the second council of the three-man council, and he's the advisor to Napoleon. Jacobins and the Jacobins were completely in the hands of the Jesuits.
That's right. All of the slave rebellions that I have studied in the South were inspired by the French Revolution. And Eric John Phelps has showed in his work, Vatican Assassins, very clearly, the Jesuits were behind the French Revolution. You look at all the major players in France, Robespierre, Abbé Sieyès, Voltaire, they're all Jesuits or Jesuit-trained men, all of them. And there's another one named Diderot as well. But anyway, I want to get...
And then the crowning event, too, Drake. Don't forget Napoleon. Napoleon was trained by him, and he came right out of Corsica, where all the Jesuits were confined by the King of France when they were suppressed in 1764.
Yeah. I want to get to this quote here by Harriet Beecher Stowe. Any of you men from the South, you know who Harriet Beecher Stowe is, and I have read numerous different history books that when Abraham Lincoln first met Harriet Beecher Stowe, he looked at her and he said, "This is the little woman that started this great war." She wrote the book Uncle Tom's Cabin. And I want to quote for you a section out of the Key to Uncle Tom's Cabin, Part 4, Chapter number 9, page 485, quotation. "Our admiration of some of the laborers who have conducted the system is very great. So also is our admiration of many of the Jesuit missionaries who have spread the Roman Catholic religion among our aboriginal tribes." Unquote. Isn't that interesting? Yes.
Wow, that's huge.
Yes.
That's huge, Drake.
Yeah.
Here's another thing. But another thing we got to remember about her too. She never was in the South.
Yeah.
She never went to the South. How would she know anything about what's going on in the South?
Yeah.
She's a co-juder, and you know what? And another thing is too. She and Victoria had a little trinket. She had one half, and Victoria had the other. So that shows you the Jesuits were in complete and total control of the administration of Queen Victoria, because they were busy using the British intelligence to foment the war between the states too.
Yeah. I don't know all the details of that. I'll definitely have to look into that. So this brings us to another era, okay? So we've touched on, especially American white men, we've touched on the Civil War. We've told you the men behind the Civil War and the regaining of monarchical powers by the Roman Catholic elements coming out of Middle Europe with Prince von Metternich. We've showed you with Sumner, and by the way, you've documented this, Eric. I've documented this as well on my blog. Thaddeus Stevens, my friends, has a bedside conversion to Roman Catholicism. I've
That's right.
put it from a book on my blog. Yes. Okay,
right.
so
the Sisters of Charity, the Black Sisters of Charity, by the way, they're the ones that administered his baptism on his deathbed.
Yeah.
I have that document on my PowerPoint. The other thing is, I just found out in a great book, it's probably the best book written on the Southern Reconstruction, telling the truth. It's called The Tragic Era.
Okay.
In that book, The Tragic Era, it tells you that Thaddeus Stevens' best friend in Lancaster was a priest, and he used to take long walks with him.
That's hilarious.
And Thaddeus Stevens' mulatto concubine, Lydia Smith, was a Roman Catholic, and she was constantly at the feet of her priest, probably getting instructions for Thad. And she is buried in a Roman Catholic cemetery in Lancaster called St. Mary's Cemetery.
Yeah. All right, so the next period that I want to focus attention on is the Civil Rights era, okay? And this is a big one with the Southern Jesuit coadjutors who think that the Jews are behind everything, okay? They'll say the Jews are behind everything. I want to point your attention, my friend, to two gentlemen. One, his name is Theodore Hesburgh, and the second gentleman you need to read about is a man named John Lafarge Jr. John Lafarge Jr. is the mentor of Martin Luther King. Eric has documented that. Eric has documented that in his book. I've documented that on my blog in great detail. And you can also read about how Martin Luther King met with Pope Paul VI. He also had a connection with him as well. Yeah, go ahead.
The book I was looking for, I can't find it on my shelf, of course, is John Lafarge and this book on the Catholic Interventionism.
Yeah.
We get a little feedback here. But John Lafarge, see, the civil rights movement really began in the 30s.
Yeah. And
it began with John Lafarge, and you can get that book that he wrote about it. And Lafarge, he also is the tutor of A. Philip Randolph.
Yeah, A. Philip Randolph.
A. Philip Randolph was the head of the group, the Sleeping Car Porters, and they want full integration and the whole nine yards. Whereas in the 30s, during FDR's early administration, there was a movement among decent and respectable blacks for a Back to Africa movement.
Right, yeah.
FDR, advised by Edmund Walsh, Jesuit Edmund Walsh, killed it.
Yeah.
There can be no permitted Back to Africa movement in this country. So therefore, you have Walsh, you have John Lafarge. Lafarge dies in 1963, shortly before the Kennedy assassination. You have those two key Jesuits pushing this interracialism because that's exactly what the Jesuits sought to do with the first Reconstruction. The Civil Rights Movement and all of this is nothing more than the second Reconstruction in this country. Race mix, miscegenate, amalgamate, mulattoize this country so that there will be no strong white population with a Bible in one hand and a gun in the other, led by patriotic statesmen who resist the Jesuit tyranny in their state or in Washington. Yeah.
And for any listeners out, go ahead. Go ahead, sorry.
Let me say, okay, go ahead. I was just going to say that sounds like a radical statement. It sounds like a radical statement, but you can read almost these very words by Dabney in his great work, The Defense of Virginia in the South. He said, the policy of our conquerors is to race mix us so there will never be the resistance of righteous Virginia freemen that make our conquerors quake in their boots.
Yeah. He says that we were going to be miscegenated in with this vile stream from the ferns of Africa.
Africa. Those were his words. That's right.
Yeah. All right. So, just want you to know, guys, and I have lost about 75% of my readers over these racial issues, and just in case you think we're just a bunch of white bigots, venting our hatred on the radio waves, I want you to read a small section out of it was like a kind of a catechism that Frederick Engels wrote. It was called The Principles of Communism. He wrote this work in 1847. I've seen some versions where it's in section 21 or some versions where it's in section 22. It's one of those two sections of that work. And you will read where he states very clearly at the very outset, that's laying the foundation for what communism is. He says we have to integrate and miscegenate the races as an application of his view of property. Just like you dissolve the classes in property, we have to dissolve the class distinctions in race as well. Folks, the idea that a person lives for their tribe, for their race, their religion, for their kith and kin, this is as old as man himself. This is as natural as it gets. The people who invent this and who invents these ideas that we shouldn't care about our race and prefer our race and prefer our own kind? The communists.
Yeah. I want to mention something here, Drake. That's only for the white man. The white man cannot prefer his own kind. The white man cannot prefer his own race. The blacks are encouraged to prefer their own race, and they should. And the Hispanics are encouraged to prefer their own race, and they should. But whenever a white man does that, why, he's the demon devil himself, because we're not allowed that liberty. Because we're the ones that resist. We're the ones that resist the Pope's white power structure.
That's right. And you will find a liberal. I go to the University of Louisville and talk to college kids about this stuff, and they freak out on me. And you will it's very interesting watching the hypocrisy of this line of thinking, because when they talk to black people, when they're trying to get them agitated against whites, race is as real and existent a thing as anything, as oxygen itself. They want them to know that race exists and your race has been persecuted. But when they talk to white men who want to prefer their own race, they look at a white man, they say, race is just a convention. It doesn't really exist. It's just kind of an abstraction that we've invented in our minds. It is total hypocrisy. They don't believe what they're saying.
No. And here's the proof of the pudding, Drake. If you're a white man and you ever live around black people like I have, I had a black girlfriend when I was in high school. I used to go to Parchester Village, which is all black, next to my all-white Montalban Manor. I know what it's like living around black people, and race to them is number one. Yeah.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. And to the white liberals, they know that, and they know that they have to appeal to that priority that they have in their communities. So this brings us to another important thing. Who are the people that create all of this liberation theology? Eric has written so much about this. Eric, can you give us kind of a synopsis of the Jesuit order in South America and how they fought against the Portuguese and the Spanish?
Oh, okay. You mean in the 1700s? That time?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, well, just remember the Jesuits had their 59 reductions in what we would call Brazil today and Paraguay. And it encompassed 300,000 Guarani Indian slaves. In fact, my former student in my class, he's a professor on Brazilian history, especially pertaining to the reductions. Mm-hmm. And so he told me that absolutely they had these huge colonies. They were making buku money for the Jesuits. It was each according to his ability and to each according to his need. So it was the principles of communism there perfected on the Paraguayan reductions from 1609 to 1759 for 150 years. The Jesuits would take all their manufacturing, all the violins, all the clocks, all the hides, the tallow, the Paraguayan herb, the silver of Venezuela. They would send all this into international commerce and trade with their black ships. And these black ships, it was the second largest fleet in the world, second only to the Dutch. And they've created the huge banks in Europe, especially the one out of Marseille and Paris in France. They had these huge banks in Europe from the huge trade that they had in South America for 150 years, and then they would finance their wars, like the 30 Years' War and other wars that they would hatch out against the Protestant nations to destroy us. Well, when the Jesuits were suppressed in 1774 by France and 1767 by Spain, they were all kicked out. So in the 1800s, they were getting back their power, so that in the 1900s, they're going to pretend to be on the side of the people, and they will use their French Jesuit, Teilhard de Chardin, to be the big promoter of what is called liberation theology. And liberation theology is nothing more than rising up against anybody that has any property or land, overthrowing them, so that ultimately some dictator can come to power. That's the end result, is a military dictator. Well, this liberation theology is now what's called black theology by a guy named Cone, a black hater of white men and a professor. I can't remember the place. I think it's Princeton. And black theology, which is what Jeremiah Wright preaches to Barry Davis Obama, it's nothing more than Jesuit liberation theology, which is the imposition of socialist communism that then results in a military dictator.
Yep. And the Jesuits told the natives in South America that white men had devils in their bodies, and that they would eat their children. Yeah, that's right. You white devils. Folks, that was penned. That was originated in Jesuit propaganda, okay? And not only
the source for that, and the source for that is R.W. Thompson's work, The Footprints of the Jesuits, written in 1896, on the section of Paraguay.
And folks, the New Advent Catholic Encyclopedia admits this. You can go to the New Advent Catholic Encyclopedia. There's an article called Reductions of Paraguay. In the section that goes Conditions of Property, it says, and I quote, "The economic basis was a sort of communism." It wasn't a sort of communism. It was communism. And this is where communism is perfected. Folks, the Jews didn't perfect communism. The Jesuits did.
No.
This is standard history. Yeah.
That's right. The Jesuits are the authors and perfecters of communism. Who are the ones that were behind Fabian socialism in England that ultimately was imported into Russia in the 1917 revolution?
The Jesuits.
The Jesuits. And they named Fabian socialism after a Roman general.
Yeah. And this is nothing new, really, in the history of Roman Catholicism. Thomas Aquinas writes about it in his Summa Theologica. Thomas More writes about it in his book Utopia. And I have shown from writings of Friedrich Hegel that Friedrich Hegel bases his dialectical principle off the Roman scholastic doctrine of filioque. Yes, I have documented that very clearly. The Roman Catholic doctrines are the base. The Roman Catholicism is the basis of all of our problems, folks. I'm sorry, it's not the Jews.
That's absolutely right. And you talk about communism there, the Jesuits, and Romanism was perfecting communism. I went to the Jesuit spiritual center not far from here in Wernersville, Pennsylvania. It used to be a novitiate. Well, there's a cemetery there, and I always drive down and take a look at the cemetery, see if I see any new additions. And they completely reworked it, but all the headstones are laid out, arcing from one end to another. It's a vaginal shape. Yeah. So it's the vaginal Virgin Mary shape that we're going to bury all our Jesuits in the structure. All the Jesuit headstones have three things on them, or four things: their name, the day they were born, the day they entered into the order, and the day they died. And all the names on the Jesuit headstones are all white on a black base. All the names are in all capital letters because they're military soldiers. So it's all universal equality. There's no different headstones. They're all the same. It's completely and totally communist. Yeah.
And I have one of the headquarters of liberal theology in America is right here in my hometown of Louisville. It's the PCUSA, the so-called Presbyterian Church of the United States of America. They have absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with the history of Presbyterianism, but somehow they get away with calling themselves Presbyterian. Who knows how they do that? But I like to go in their bookstore and kind of play around, and I'm curious about what they're teaching their people every now and then. So I buy some of their theology books from time to time, and one book that I bought recently is kind of a consensus of liberal theology on a smattering of different theological issues. And I keep running into this, quote, this guy here. His name is Gustavo Gutierrez, okay? He is a Dominican monk. He is like the master liberation theologian right now, okay? And he was trained by a Jesuit named Henry de Lubac. That's L-U-B-A-C. He was a French Jesuit. And these guys are the masters of the racial liberation theology, guys. It's not Jews. They're not Jews. They're Jesuit and Roman Catholic Jesuit-trained monks within the Roman Catholic Church who are behind all this. And this is quite fascinating. If you study the history of South America, we've given you kind of a small synopsis. Where did our recent Pope came from? Okay, where did he come from? He came from South America. And if you know anything about the Falklands War, he was an advisor to one of some military general down there during the Falklands War, and the Prime Minister of England at the time was good old Margaret Thatcher. She tried to kill this guy during the Falklands War. What happens to Margaret Thatcher, folks, 3 weeks after our recent Pope is inaugurated? She's dead. 3 weeks after Pope Francis comes into his reign, his arch enemy in England dies. Don't you think that's? I think that's more than a coincidence. What do you think about that?
Well, it's no coincidence because we have to remember that the Jesuits run British intelligence.
Yeah.
And it's the intelligence communities that run the governments of all the worlds of the government that they're over. The intelligence community runs it. They're all dovetailed together at the top, at the Vatican, as they're overseen by the Knights of Malta and the High Jesuits.
Yeah.
I want to add this. I want to add this before I forget this one too, is that because you're a son of the Southern Patriots, the Southern White Protestant Patriots, I would suggest as a remedy for your listeners who are also Southern white men, is that you start your own Sons of the Confederate South against Rome.
Okay.
Yep.
That's a good
I'll be
idea.
happy to speak for you anytime you want me.
All right, very good. Very good. And here's just one. We want to make sure. I want to make sure I don't leave any of you guys anywhere to run. Okay. I want to give you no caves to hide in. I want to give you no shade whatsoever. You're going to have to face the glaring sun of truth here. So we need to deal with Freemasonry as well, because Freemasonry is another kind of issue where they think the Jews run the Freemasonry as well. Okay, we need to get in behind the history of Freemasonry, and isn't the Golden Revolution of 1688 kind of behind this, Eric?
Not that I know of. It may have participated, but we have to remember.
I mean, the Jesuits get kicked out of England with the war. When William of Orange comes into England, they tried to regain power in England even after they lost to William of Orange. And so, in order to regain power in England, go ahead.
You have the Glorious Revolution of 1688. Not one drop of blood was shed. You have James II being driven out. Thank God. My only regret is that his daughter, who was married to William, didn't have him executed. He actually let him escape to France. But nonetheless, you have William of Orange in 1689 coming down. He takes the throne, and on the ships that come down, it's on the flags of the ships, the Protestant Reformation and the liberties of the English people. That's all written on the flags, on the sails of those ships. So he comes in, he's crowned king, and in 1690, the Jesuits try to attack again. 1 year later, it's called the Battle of the Boyne. James II is driven out. He never comes back. He goes to France. And the Jesuits then decide to contrive to take back the throne, because the Stuarts now are going to be barred from the throne because of their Catholic design of overthrowing the Protestant liberties there. And I think in 1701 they're forever banned. And so the Jesuits in the early 1700s, by 1724, 25, they write every degree of Scottish Rite Freemasonry from 1 to 25 in the College of Clermont in Paris, France, where they train their Jesuit Jacob and Robespierre. Yeah. So they're busy writing Scottish Rite. And so the Jesuits now are going to call upon what's left of the Scottish Templars that are living in Scotland and have Rosslyn Castle to join with them. So they're going to join up with them. And then when the Jesuits are suppressed by the Pope in 1773, Frederick the Great protects them in Prussia, and they go to Silesia, which will be the heart of the concentration camp system in Poland later, Auschwitz, Silesia. And while the Jesuits are there under Frederick the Great, they're going to write the last 8 degrees of Scottish Rite there in Prussia. So the Jesuits wrote every rite of the order of the craft, and you can see this in the rite of Hiram Abiff. You can see it in their use of the term IHS. I have David Bernard's great work, Light on Masonry. He shows you that they're using IHS in their rites. We're strictly Jesuit.
Mm-hmm. And you got to understand, folks, it's right when they are suppressed. That's when the big esoteric group starts to be created, the Illuminati. And who do we have as the creator of the Illuminati? Not a Jew, a professional Roman Catholic named Adam Weishaupt. He wasn't just a Catholic layman or something who just liked some philosophy. He was a professional. He was a professor of canon law. Okay, and he was Jesuit trained.
That's right. And he models the Illuminati after the Jesuit order. There's 4 degrees. There's 4 degrees of the Illuminists. There's 4 degrees in the Jesuits, generally.
Yeah.
And when they take their 4th vow, the 4th vow, that's the bloody oath of the Jesuits.
Yeah. So, folks, the Masonic Lodge, I'm very familiar with the Templar Rite. I did a huge presentation when I was in college on Freemasonry. It was such a blast. It wasn't even like doing homework. And I did my section on the Templar Rite and the Scottish Freemasonry. I can't remember. Do they have an order? Is there a Knights of Malta order within Freemasonry as well? Is there like a degree?
That's one of their rights. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we have within the Masonic Lodge, and it's Templarism. Freemasonry is just Templarism, folks. It's just a revivalism. Albert Pike says that very thing in his Morals and Dogma. Yeah. It's Templarism. Yep. Okay, so let's just summarize here, folks, because we're coming to the end of our discussion. All right, these are all the major points of contention. Okay, who were the first international bankers? Were they Jews or were they white Catholics? White Catholics. Who were the first, the originators of Zionism, this huge movement towards regaining of, it was really the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem. That was what it was called. Was it Jews behind that, or was it white Catholics? White Catholics. Who is behind all of the Jewish fury literature that you have being fomented, being popularized in Nazi Germany? The Roman Catholic theologians, Justin Martyr, John Chrysostom. Who do we have behind the Protestant Reformation? It's not Jews. Jews had nothing whatsoever to do with the furthering of the Protestant Reformation. Who do we have?
By the way, these same people, Drake, tell you that Knox was a Jew. That's another ridiculous. Yes, they'll tell you Knox was a Jew. Yeah.
It's unbelievable. It's crazy. All right. And one of the reasons, I think it was in the bull, the Dominus Ac Redemptor Noster, was one of the reasons the Jesuits were suppressed was because they had mastered the art of class warfare. They had, yes. So
they were causing class warfare between the orders and the Catholic Church.
Yes. Yeah.
That's why the Dominicans took the Inquisition. They took the Inquisition from the Jesuits, which was suppressed, and the Jesuits' vengeance on the Dominicans was several thousands of them in France, cutting off their testicles and letting them die in the streets. That's what the Jacobins did.
Wow. Yeah, I remember watching a recent movie on Robespierre, and they never say it, but they make mention of this of going back to the monastery to talk to these guys at the monastery. They never say their names in the movie. It's this recent French movie on Robespierre. It's pretty fascinating. They never actually mention the guy. It's probably Abbé Says they're talking about. But all right, so who are the masters of class warfare? The Jews or the Jesuits? The Jesuits. Okay, who are the men? What was the driving influence behind the Civil War? Was it Jews? No. It was the Roman Catholic, Holy Roman Empire representative. His name is Prince von Metternich. There's 3 major documents or 3 major events you want to look at. You want to look at the Treaty of Verona, the Council of Vienna, and the Cherry Council. Okay? And Charles Sumner... Go ahead.
Council of Vienna is 1814, 1815. Then you have the Secret Treaty of Verona, 1822. Then you have the Monroe Doctrine of 1823. And then you have the secret treaty, the overhearing of what the Jesuit general was talking with their assistants. You have that in 1825.
Yeah. Okay. So that is what is behind our invasion down here, my southern brethren. Okay. And who was behind? Who was behind the uncivil rights legislation? One of the main players on he was one of the main guys on the committee was a man named Theodore Hesborough. Okay, you need to look into him. The other guy who is behind the theology and the thinking of Martin Luther King, a Jesuit named John Lafarge Jr., who created communism. The Jesuits, not the Jews, who created racial liberation theology. The Jesuits. Ignatius Loyola was not a Jew. Ignatius Loyola was a Spanish Roman Catholic. He was not a Jew. He was and who is behind Freemasonry? Very clearly, it's the Templarism of the Roman Catholic Church and the revived Templars, the Jesuit order. Okay, we left you nowhere to run, my friend. We left you nowhere to go. So, I thank you, Eric. Do you have anything else you want to say on the broadcast here?
No, I would just encourage the white Southern men that are listening to truly repent of their sins and believe the gospel, that Christ died for your sins according to the Scriptures and buried and rose again. And as many as received him, to them gave you power to become the sons of God, even to them that believe on his name. So once you're saved, now you have the Spirit of God to begin to resist the power of the devil as exercised through his Jesuits and all their white coadjutors and the white power structure that runs everything.
Oh, I have two last things I wanted to ask you. You have, I think, in your broadcast, you've mentioned a book that it's being written or will be written or published soon. It's by a black lady who wrote a book on exposing Martin Luther King. Can you give me the title of that book?
Oh yes, I have it for sale. Her name is, the author is Erin Fraser.
Okay.
And the book is titled King, Was He a False Prophet?
Okay.
And she completely takes him apart. She mentions Lafarge. She mentions the whole civil rights movement being run by the Jesuits. She shows how it's anti-black. It was never intended to benefit the black people. And she has a picture of him with Paul VI, with Ralph Abernathy and Marcinkus. They're in the same picture when they went to the Vatican. So, and remember, Michael King, that was his real name. He never changed his name to Martin Luther King. It was Michael King. He was a member of the Booley Society, and the Booley Society, for your listeners, is nothing more than a black skull and bones.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm very familiar with the university that he went to. Was kind of administrated by a Freemason, was it not?
I think so. He went to Boston University, too.
And
Boston University is very much linked to Boston College.
Okay. Yeah.
So, there was an absolute Jesuit connection between King and the civil rights movement. Of course, then again, look, you got the civil rights. Who's reporting this? Do you think I could get the press out doing anything on me? Why, of course not. Henry Robinson Luce, the Knight of Malta, in control of Time Life, and you had Frank Shakespeare, who was the head of CBS, both of them Knights of Malta. They gave him all kinds of press when this march to Washington, in 1962, early 63? He had the Pope's press behind it.
The other question that I had, and it takes me so long to read through your book because I want to spend so much time and gather everything. Every chapter I read in your book is it's mind blowing. I have to I can't just leave the chapter without digging everything out of it. So I haven't really gotten to this point yet, and I wanted to see if you could maybe throw a couple things here at me. You are, and I can see it happening in global affairs. But I would really like to have a quote for some friends of mine on the issue of the Sino-Soviet Muslim invasion and the Russian invasion that we have here. Is there any books that actually document where somebody states that there is an intention for this to happen, or is this a deduction that you have from a number of global events that have happened?
I don't have, the only statement that I have is from the Chinese with their intention to invade. Because when they were practicing in the Straits of Formosa, someone had accosted them. It was reported, I think, in the British press. And they said, "What are you doing this for?" And some of the men they interviewed said, "We were preparing for the invasion of America."
What was it called? What was it? Was a parade?
No, it was a military operation, a naval operation in the Straits of Formosa. South China Sea, something around there.
Okay.
And they were practicing for their naval practice for invasion.
Okay.
Someone was questioned by them, and he says, well, we're preparing for the invasion of North America. I mean, in China right now, they teach Australia as New China. They're going to invade Australia, too.
Yeah.
They're going to take New Zealand, Australia. They're going to take the whole Pacific Rim, and when they're done doing that, then they'll come over to the West Coast here, as the Japanese intended to do, but never carried it out because the Jesuits didn't want them to succeed. But the Jesuits want the Chinese to succeed, so they will successfully land on the West Coast.
I thought I listened to an interview. Go ahead, sorry.
One more thing. There's never been a division between Communist China and Communist Russia. Never. They've always worked together.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know of any fights they've had anytime soon.
Never.
Yeah. I know another interview that you have done, I thought I remember you quoting a book on this about Cuba being used as a platform or a kind of a gateway into North America. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, that's correct. I mentioned that Cuba is to be a staging base because that was one of the designs of Operation Northwoods.
Oh yeah, that's right.
To send an aircraft over there to pretend it got shot down by Cuba and then to supposedly foment a war. That was just poppycock. It was the purpose of closing off Cuba, so that it could then be isolated from Americans, so that it could be prepared for a staging base into North America. And that's why they have some large ports there, because they're going to need these ports when the attack comes from Senegal and Mauritania. And by the way, the ports in those African countries are owned and controlled by the Chinese. Just like Panama Canal is controlled by the Chinese. So when they come in, a huge sweeping attack from Africa and then up through the Panama Canal, Cuba will be a staging base. They got all kinds of weapons there to load up. And I maintain they have an underground corridor from Cuba to Miami, and they'll be showing up just immediately, coming up there through some underground tunnels that they've built, and it'll be a huge surprise invasion because the press will not report it here, just like they were involved in the invasion of Hawaii with the Pearl Harbor. The press was involved in that, keeping that a surprise.
Yep. Wow, that's freaky, man. And I remember when I watched the movie, the Battle of Los Angeles, just a couple months ago, when I watched that, man, that was freaky. It just was just so realistic. Have you heard about that new robot that they've released recently, the Atlas robot?
Yeah.
Just this month.
I think Starbuck makes it. Yeah.
Yeah, up in Boston Dynamics. It is a fully functional Terminator. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe my eyes when I was looking at it. Unbelievable.
Oh, yeah.
Unbelievable.
Right. The Terminator is a real deal. Not all the super things that was in Schwarzenegger's movie, but they have the real deal going. And what better thing to do to send Terminators in to kill people, and then you don't have to risk your soldiers?
Exactly. They have no will. All right, well, it's been a pleasure, Eric. Thank you so much for coming on. We're going to have you again, okay?
My pleasure, Drake, and Lord bless your listeners, too.
All right, thanks. Have a good one. God bless. Bye.